Hello students, welcome to Study Live. Well, today we are going to learn about locomotion and movement. Well student, what do you understand by this? Do you think they both are same? No, not at all. Well, when I talk about movement, that means something is moving. But here in biology, we are talking about our body. Right? For example, right now I am explaining with my hands movement. That is a movement. Similarly, the movement of my tongue, the movement of the fingers, they are all sort of movement. Well, when I talk about locomotion, again, motion in physics, that means something is moving. But loco, that means something is moving, but that leads to change in the position of the body. Maybe by walking. For example, what is happening by walking? My body is changing the place right from here to there. Similarly, this we can observe by flying of a bird that changes the position, or by running, by walking, by dancing. These are all stands for locomotion. Well student, you all know locomotion is observed in all the living organisms. For example, if I am talking about amoeba, amoeba do not have legs or a wing to fly, right? But they are moving with the help of their pseudopodia. What is this? Basically, pseudopodias are the false leg observed in amoeba. You all must have seen this picture of amoeba that they have the false leg, and these are called as podia, which leads to the movement of the body from one place to another place. This was one such living organism. Well student, if I talk about paramecium, they have cilia all through their body. Am I right? Have you seen this? Well student, cilia is basically a thin hair-like structure all through their surrounded, with the help of which they are able to move from one place to another place. That's how the locomotion takes place in case of paramecium. Well, let's talk about something different. What is this? That is Hydra. Hydra is an organism which is mostly observed in water. For example, it is their body. They have tentacles in their body. Tentacles, that means only this upper part that is having a thin hair-like structure is responsible for the movement from one place to another place. Well, when I talk about a living being, what do we have? Exactly, we use our limbs. In case of human beings, we make use of our limbs. That is your forelimbs and your hind limbs, which is responsible for us to move from one place to another place. Well, do you got it now? How the locomotion takes place in case of amoeba, in case of paramecium, Hydra and the human beings too. Likewise, in case of birds, it is with the help of their wings. Well student, I would like to ask you, why do we need to move? Why do amoeba have to move from one place to another place? Why do the human beings have to move? Well, let's talk about its significance. So, do you have the answer of this? Students, when you're hungry, what do? You move from your bedroom to your kitchen, right? That is for the search of food. So, that can be one such reason for the locomotion, that we move from one place to another place in search of the food. Well, what if someone's catching you? If you are trying to catch hold of amoeba, what the amoeba will do? Amoeba will try to save, right? So yes, away from the predators, we all move from one place to another place. And yes, student, in search of the food and to keep our body away from the enemies or the predators, we all move. Hence, that leads to the chances of the survival more. Well, this was all about the introduction of locomotion and movement. We'll be studying about their types and details later. Well, today we are going to learn about the types of movement. Well, what is a movement? Movement is slight changes of the body. But what it is? For example, movement of my fingers, movement of my hands. That is all stands for movement. But you know what, student? There are three types of movement. Namely, the first one, that is called Amivoid Moment. The second one, that is called a Ciliary Moment. And the third type, that is called a Muscular Movement. Well, we'll be learning each of them in detail. Amivoid Moment. When I say amoeboid, what comes to your mind? It's that amoeba? You are right. Well, student, in amoeba, what do we observe? We observe a false legs, right? And they are called pseudopodia. But here we are not talking about amoeba as of. We are talking about the human body which is having the amoeboid movement. What it is exactly? You must have observed the function of WBC. What does WBC do in your body? It enhances and it fights with the foreign particles, right? So basically, the WBCs and macrophages. The WBCs and macrophages in your body, which basically fights from the foreign particles which just entered in the body. What do? They show the phagocytic movement. What is that? Phagocytic movement is basically, this is a foreign particle which is trying to come in contact with your body. So they make an extra false leg and engulf them in the cell. That is called the phagocytic movement. Well, student, with this you are able to enhance your immunity system which is observed in your body in the blood cells, that is white blood cells, with the help of the macrophagocytosis movement. Well, student, this type of movement is also called as pseudopodial movement, because this movement is happening with the help of the pseudopodia, which is basically the false leg. Hence, it is called as amoeboid movement. Well, let's talk about the ciliary movement. Cilia, that means what? For example, a paramecium, which is completely covered with a thin hair-like structure on their body, isn't it? And this cilia is what? Basically a thin hair-like structure which is responsible for the paramecium to move from one place to another place. But here we are not talking about paramecium. We are talking about in the human being, where does the ciliary movements takes place? Well, student, in your trachea, that is a respiratory tract, we have the ciliary cells which traps the dust particle from the foreign surrounding. So, in our trachea, that is the nose part, we have the ciliary movement which is responsible for the attack of the foreign particles and with which we can resist our body. Well, not only trachea, also in case of ovary, that leads to ovulation. That leads to ovulation, basically formation of the egg which takes place from the fallopian tube to the uterus is taking place with the help of the ciliary movement that is happening, that is present in the internal organs of your body. Similarly, there are various places in our body in the internal linings of the internal organs. For example, the fallopian tube, the tracheal, the respiratory tract, that is trachea. We have the ciliary cells present which are responsible for our body to resist from something. So they play a very important role in your body. However, you will not be able to know, but these processes are happening continuously in your body. Well, let's talk about the third type, that is the muscular movement. Muscular movement is what basically, students? For example, movement of hands, or when you are walking, or when you are talking. What is happening basically? Your muscles, which is present all over the body, is moving, right? So muscular movement is one such movement which is responsible for all the movement in your body. It is not just about the movement, it is also about all the activities that is taking place in your body. That is, from walking, what is happening? The contraction and relaxation of the muscles. So you can say, how does the muscular movement takes place? It takes place with the help of the contraction and relaxation of the muscles, with the help of which the muscular movement takes place. Well, student, these are the three types of movement, that is the Amivoid movement, which is also called as pseudopodial movement, ciliary movement, which is happening in the internal organs of the body, also the muscular movement, which is happening due to the simultaneous contraction and relaxation of your body that leads to the complete locomotion and movement in your body, and all the day-to-day activities you are able to perform with the help of the movements. All these three combinations of the movements leads to performance of the different activities. That's all about this concept. I hope you've got the clarity. Well, what is muscles exactly? Let us understand in biological term. Well, you all know when we are in the embryonic stage, the three layers form in the embryonic stage. What is that? The ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. Well, student, so muscles are originated from the mesoderm. So, when we are talking about any body parts in biological term, we need to understand first its location, its position, its function, and also from where it is originated. So, muscles are mesodermal in origin. Also, students, 40 to 50% of your body weight comprises of the muscles. So, your weight is basically 40 to 50%, nothing but the muscles of your body. And what are the characteristics or the properties that you can observe in your muscles? There are different properties. What is that? It is, you must have observed that when you want to move something, what is exactly happening? The alternate contraction and relaxation of your body. So that only, it is the characteristics of the muscles that whenever you want to move something, there has to be contraction of the muscle, there has to be relaxation of the muscles. So, contraction. Secondly, the relaxation. Well, apart from this, also the excitability. The excitability and also the elasticity. So these are the different characteristics or the property of the muscles, that it is having the contraction ability, relaxation ability, also excitability. When you're excited, when you laugh, what is happening? The contraction and relaxation, the extension of the muscles of your lips. Likewise in all the different body parts. And also your muscles are elastic in nature. That means they are stretchable. Well, this is the property of it. When we talk about the classification, when we talk about the classification, based on its nature, it is classified as striated muscle and non-striated muscle, which is also called as the smooth muscle. So you must have heard and understood about the different types of muscles, different types of cells, the striated cells and the non-striated cell, which is also present on the walls of the heart. So based upon their nature, they are being classified as striated muscles and non-striated muscles. So based upon its action, it is categorized as voluntary muscles and involuntary muscles. Now what is this, student? Voluntary muscles means which involves your permission. Until you don't want to write, you don't want to move your hand, it will not. So that is called the voluntary action of the body, and involuntary action means you are not aware of. That action is completely happening without your permission. That is called involuntary action. For example, blinking of your eyes, your heartbeats, that is basically stands for involuntary action of the muscles. Well, this was just the general thing about the muscle and its characteristics and also its classification. Well, let's talk about the types of movement. Based upon their position, the muscles are categorized into 3 different classes. First, we'll be learning about the skeletal muscles. Skeletal, what do you understand by this term? Skeletal means something related to bones. But students, imagine your body without the muscles. That means only bones. No. So you must have heard about it. All the different skeletons, all the different bone is covered with the help of the muscles. So muscles which is closely in contact with the bone is your skeletal muscle. So the first characteristic of the skeletal muscle is they are closely in contact with the bone. Rather, you can say the muscle which is used, the muscle which is surrounded by the bone to cover the bone is basically the skeletal muscle. Also, they are voluntary in action. Voluntary in action means until you don't want to move your body, it will not. For example, when you are changing the position or taking the posture, what is happening? The voluntary action is taking place and basically the skeletal muscles are involved with the help of which the movement is taking place. And also student, they are striated in nature. And what are the examples? As I just mentioned, changing the posture. Posture of your body. So, for all the actions that is being taken place for the posture of the body and also the movement of the body is basically involvement of the skeletal muscle. So, this was one such type. Well, student, let's talk about the second type. What is that? That is B type. And this is basically something different. That is the visceral muscles. What it is? Students, when you eat the food, where does it go? It goes to your stomach, right? But how does it go? Do you put any pipe or something? No. What do we have? Exactly, we have the esophagus which is responsible to carry the food right from the mouth to your stomach, right? But when this is happening, that is because of the visceral movement. So what you can say is, in action, it is involuntary. Involuntary in action. As you have seen over here, they are by nature they are categorized as striated and non-striated, and by action it is categorized as voluntary and involuntary. So when I am talking about the visceral muscle, they are involuntary action. Why so? Because I am taking their examples as the movement of food from mouth to stomach is basically happening by the alternate contraction and relaxation of the muscles. But which muscles I am talking about? The visceral muscles that I am talking about. Well, student, did you get it? And also, they are striated in nature. In nature means how do they look exactly cell-wise? Well, we talk about the last, that is the third type of cell, which is the cardiac. Cardiac muscles. Cardiac means what comes to your mind? Exactly, the heart part. So the entire heart is called as the cardiac muscles, because you must have observed the muscle of your heart is completely different than that of the muscle of the rest part of the body. Likewise, we have different types of muscles present in different organ, different region. For example, the muscles of the eye, very sensitive. The muscle of your lips is again different. The muscles and the skin of your palm is again different. So here we have the complete different muscles in our heart, that is called as cardiac muscle. So now you can say where it is present. Exactly, it is present in the heart. They are present in heart. Also, student, they are involuntary in action. Can you tell me why so? Involuntary in action? Because do you know when does your heart beats? When is the contraction, relaxation and the pumping of the blood takes place? You do not know, right? Because that processes keep on happening without even your prior intimation. Am I right? That's why the cardiac muscles are called as involuntary in action. And last point of the student is they are striated in nature. That means the cell, how it is having the striated muscles present all over the walls. And why does this muscles important? For the alternate contraction and relaxation of the body. Well, student, that's all about the muscles and the types of muscles. They are being categorized as the skeletal muscle, the visceral muscles, and lastly the cardiac muscle. And all three muscles are equally important and they play a very, very important role in your body. Today in the chapter Locomotion and Movement, we'll be learning about the human skeletal system and of course its function. That why is the bone very important? Why is the skeletal structure is formed? Well, student, can you imagine your body without the bones? Just imagine how will you look, just like a ball. Well, that's why the bones are being given to you to give the proper gesture and posture to your body. So let's understand how is the human skeletal system categorizes, and altogether how many bones do we have, students? Exactly 206. So let's see all 206 bones, how's that categorizes. Well, so we are understanding the human skeletal system. Okay, so the human skeletal system comprises of altogether 206 bones. Am I right? So this 206 bone is being categorized into two broad classifications. Broad classifications, namely the axial system. Axial means what, student? The center part which is being made, right? So the axial system. Now this axial system is made up of 80 bones, 80. Out of the 206 bones, the 80 bones are making your axial system. And the other part is appendicular system. Appendicular system. Now this appendicular system is comprises of the remaining bones. So how many remaining? Exactly 126 bones. Okay student, so this is a broad classification. Now when I'm talking about the axial system, this is basically the center part which is being made. So center is your skull, right? Center is your vertebral column, right? Center is your rib cage. So the axial system is being categorized as the skull, then vertebral column, and the thoracic cage. Okay student, so out of these 80 bones, the skull is comprises of 29 bones. Okay student, then the vertebral column is comprises of 26 bones and the thoracic cage is comprises of 25 bones. Are you understanding student? So that's how the classification of 80 axial bones is being categorized. Okay, well, when I am talking about skull, the skull is having total 29 bones. So skull is comprises of different types of bones. So how many different types? 4 different types of bones. Namely, the skull is being categorized as cranial bones, then the facial bones, ear bones, or you can say ear ossicles, followed by one single bone that is called as hyoid bone. Ear bone, facial bone and cranial bone. So let us understand how is this 29 bones categorized. We have 8 cranial bones, 14 facial bones, 6 ear bones. How 6? Because we have 2 ears. So each ear consists of 3 bones. So 2 into 3 is equal to 6 bones. And just one single hyoid bone. Are you understanding student? Okay, so that's how the classification of 29 skull bone is being divided. And the vertebral column is just entire. There's no classification as such. But yes, we have 5 different types of bones which comprises of the entire vertebral column. When we talk about the thoracic cage, the thoracic cage is again being divided into 2. That is the rib cage. Rib cage, which comprises of 12 pair of bones. 12 pair of bones means 12 into 2 comprises of 12 pair of bones on the either side. So they are altogether 24 rib bones. Okay, and then we have one single bone which is situated at the center of your chest, that is called as sternum. So this sternum bone is just one. Okay student, are you understanding? So here we have finished with the classification of these 80 axial system bones. Now let's talk about the appendicular system. The appendicular system is broadly classified as the limb bones and pelvis. Okay, student. So we have all together in limb bones 120 bones. And yes, whatever is remaining is your pelvis bones. Okay. Now this limb bone is again further categorized as hind limb, and forelimb. So the bones of your hands and legs. So we have all together 30 into 2. Why 30 into 2? For both the hands. Each hand comprises of 30 bones and 2 hands will be 30 into 2, that is 60 bones. Similarly, for forelimb also we have 2 legs, so 30 into 2, that is your altogether 60 bones. So that's how 120 bone is being categorized as hind limb 60 and forelimb 60. Then we have the last, that is the pelvis, which is basically comprises of the pectoral, and pelvis. So pelvis we have 4 bones and pectoral we have 2 bones. Okay, student. Now this pelvis and pectoral makes up the joints of your forelimbs and hind limbs. So students, that's how the categorization of the human skeletal system, that is 206 bones, is categorized, and that's how with the help of the tree diagram you can understand and remember it easily. Now student, what is a joint basically? Each bone is joined by the other bone, right? Basically, it is a connection, it is a link, and here somewhere it is being joined, right? We all know that we have 206 bones, but all these bones are separate. But yes, they are being connected with each other with the help of the joint. So how will you define joints? It is basically the connection between the bones, and bones are connected by the cartilages. So bones and cartilages. These connection is basically what it makes up your joint. Now students, with the help of bones you are not able to move. The bones are covered with the muscles, and muscles are responsible for the movement, exactly, and bones are just to give the shape to your body, exactly. So joint is just the connection between these, and with the help of joints, what are we able to do? We are able to move from one place to another place. So joint helps in the movement, of body. Now student, depending upon the movement, the joint is being categorized into 3 broad categories. The first one is fibrous, secondly cartilaginous, and thirdly synovial. Let's look into it. Now student, what will be the fibrous joints? The fibrous joint is basically the bones which are connected or which are joined with the help of the fibers is called as fibrous joints. So what are fibrous joints? The joints or joining of the bones. So joining in the bone with the help of the fibers is called as fibrous joint. Now, the example of this is a class example that is called as the skull. What it is called as? The skull. The skull is an example basically. Since they are being joined with the help of the fibers, they are not able to move. So you can also say that the fibrous joints do not allow movement. Do not allow movement. Hence, the very good example is skull. Have you ever observed that your skull bone is moving? No. However, the skull is comprised of 28 bones, but all are completely intact with the help of the fibers. And it is also called as, hence it is also called as synaesthesis. Synaesthesis. And what is this basically? Do not allow movement. And the example is skull. And since these joints are with the help of the fibers, it is called as a fibrous joint. The very simple way of understanding joints, isn't it, student? Well, let's look into the another. That is called as cartilaginous joint. So here the bones are, or the joints are, the joints between the bones is with the help of cartilages. Hence, it is called as cartilaginous joint, which allow a very, very slight movement. A very, very slight movement. All we can say is just a bending and a normal position. Bending and a normal position. That is called as a slight movement. The very good example of this is your vertebral column. Vertebral column is an example of cartilaginous joint. Are you understanding, student? And it is also called as, it is called as synaesthesis. It is called as amphiarthrosis. Are you understanding, students? So likewise, you can compare also. Even if in the exam the distinguish between the different joints is being asked, you can likewise compare too. Now let's talk about the third and a very important joint, that is called as synovial joint. The entire movement of your body is basically dependent on this, the synovial joint, because this is immovable, this is very slightly movable. So the rest movable is possible because of the synovial joint. So here the joints are basically in the bones is because of the synovial cavity, which in the synovial cavity the fluid is being filled, and that fluid is called as synovial fluid. Hence the joint name is synovial. So the joint is having what? It is having synovial cavity, and in this synovial cavity what is being filled? The fluid is being filled, and due to which the movement is possible. Due to which the movement is possible. This is called as synaesthesis, this is called as amphiarthrosis, and this is called as diarthrosis. Are you understanding, student? So likewise the comparison can be observed. Here I am not going to give you any example because the synovial cavity is being again categorized into 6 different classes, wherein we can see the examples in a better way. So student, the synovial cavity is being categorized into 6 joints, namely ball and socket joint. You must have heard this name when you were studying about the different parts or different types of bones. Ball and socket joint is basically your hip joint, the joint of humerus, or the joint of hip bone. Why it is called as ball and socket? Since I am talking about a humerus bone, supposing this is my humerus bone, and then it has a cavity, student. Basically a proper place wherein the other bone can join or can be filled completely. Right, student? And due to which the complete movement is possible. And here ball and socket joint is basically you can rotate into the angle of 360 degree. Are you understanding, student? Well, let's talk about the another. That is, secondly, it is hinge joint. Now, hinge joint is basically, students, your knee joining, or the second example is elbow joint. And here we have the rotation of 180 degrees. Are you understanding, student? So here we get the clarity in the example. Here you can give just simple examples because the movement is less or absent. Let's talk about the third joint, that is the pivot joint. Now, student, this is a pivot joint, the bone which is present on the upper surface of the knee. That is a joint which is a very slight movement. Slight movement is possible. Also, student, the bones of your atlas and axis vertebral column. Atlas and axis is what, student? It is a name of the initial vertebral column bone. Wherein we can see a slight movement. Now let's talk about the gliding joint. What a gliding joint, student? In the hands, we have multiple bones, right? Then we have different bone for fingers, which is named as carpal and metacarpal. So the gliding joint is the carpal or tarsal. Carpal and tarsal, the hand and the leg joints. Wherein again complete movement is possible. Then we have last, that is called as saddle joint, which is then wherein we can see the example, that is metacarpal joints and metatarsal joint. These are the two joints possible wherein the movement can be observed. So these are the 6 different joints, which including the example of synovial joint. In all these cases, what is one thing which is common, student? They all have the cavities, and those cavities are filled with the synovial fluid, due to which the movement is possible. So student, that's all about the concept of the joints. Well, student, you must have heard that various people complaining about the pain in the bones, the pain in the joint, or pain in any part of the body. Am I right? You must have observed this. So here I have to explain you all that what can be the different disorders related to the muscles or the skeletal system. Because whenever you feel pain, basically they are the pain in the joints. And all the joints are made up of what? They are made up of the combination of the muscles and the bones with which it is surrounded by. So basically a sort of bone. Here I'd like to draw you. For example, this is my bone, and this bone is just not bone. Here all over the surface, the muscles is present, which is covering this bone and also giving the proper and exact shape to your body. Am I right? Well, student, so here I have the different disorder, namely there are altogether 6 types of 6 different disease or disorders, you can say, which is caused in the muscles or with the help of the skeletals. Here I have the first one, which is called as myasthenia gravis. What is myasthenia gravis? It is basically the disorder in bone, in such a way that you keep on feeling weak. You don't feel like running. You don't feel like you're active. So basically, what is the symptom of the same? The symptom of the same is the fatigue or weakness laziness. So what do we all need to ensure that? We need to ensure that if you are facing these problems, we have to check with our doctor and we have to understand that where are our bones lacking and why are we facing through the same. Well, let's talk about the second one, that is osteoporosis. What is osteoporosis, student? It is again a kind of pain in joints, or it can be the pain in the bones. Now student, mostly in the female, where there is more excretion or more elimination or more formation of this hormone, which is called as estrogen hormone, this leads to the level of calcium lowers down. So what is happening exactly? When there is more formation and more generation of this hormone estrogen, what is happening? It leads to the weakening of the bone. Weakening of the bones. And with the help of this, what has happened? Always there will be any sort of pains in your any part of the joints or the bones or the muscles. Well, let's talk about the third one, that is tetany. What is tetany? This is basically all the bones requires what? Exactly, they requires calcium. And what is how are we getting this calcium? We are getting this calcium maybe by drinking the milk or maybe the food which is rich source of calcium, and that leads to the formation of calcium in your body which is being absorbed by the bones. But when there is lack of calcium, when there is lack of calcium in your body, what happens? Your bones pains. And that pain is basically due to the weakening of your, again, the bones. So this is how it is happening. This is because a lot of estrogen, a lot of hormone is getting wastage from the body, and that makes the bones weak. But here the actual reason is the calcium, that your body is not getting enough amount of calcium, which leads to the weakening of the bone, and there will be pain in the bones as well as the pain in the joints. So basically this is because of the calcium level in the bones. Let's talk about the third one, that is the GOAT. Here we also have the arthritis and lastly the muscular dystrophy. You must have heard this word arthritis many a time. Basically, well, let's talk about GOAT first. The GOAT is basically due to the, I can say, accumulation. What is accumulation? Something which is adhering on the particular given surface. The accumulation of uric acid on bones. So when there is excess formation of uric acid or uric phosphates, what will happen? They are accumulated on the surface of the bones, which may leads to the pain that is called as the GOAT. Then we have arthritis, which is basically due to the inflammatory. When you observe the inflammation in the bones, when the bones are getting inflamed, what is happening? That is basically the arthritis. And arthritis is also very commonly observed in all over the surrounding, because what is happening with respect to the age, as in when the aging is happening, there will be some amount of muscle which is getting detached from the bone surface, and that leads to the inflammation in the bones, and that is called arthritis, which is again a kind of disorder which needs to be taken care of. And lastly, we have muscular dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy is mostly caused by the genetic disorder. Basically, what is happening here? This is genetic disorder which is getting gene from your parents to the offsprings. Basically, here what is happening? Degeneration of the bones. In degeneration of the bones, What is exactly happening? This is the bones are getting degenerated. The small amount of bones which is from the bone marrow, that what are we getting? We are getting enough amount of wastage of the nutrients which is already present in the bone, which is important so that our bone should be strong and healthy. But from inside it is getting hollow slowly. That is a genetic disorder. So these are the various disorders, namely altogether 6, wherein we find some or the other sort of problem in our bone as well as in our muscles. Or if there is lack of contraction between the bone and the muscle, there will be these sort of diseases observed. Hence, you all need to ensure that you are getting enough amount of calcium for your bones, and also you are doing the proper exercise, or you are doing meditation, or you are doing various physical activities or outdoor games to keep your bones strong and healthy. Today, we'll be learning about something really interesting. Exactly, that's what you can see, the bones of the skull. However, drawing the structure, understanding the diagram, and also the labeling, the worst part. I hope you all don't like this, but let us understand in a simpler way. Well, when I talk about the bones, altogether, the skull bone is comprises of 29 bones. And these 29 bones are basically divided into altogether 29 bones. But these 29 bones are basically of 4 types. That means they are categorized into 4 different types. The first one, that is called the cranium, followed by the facial bone. Cranium bones, facial bones, then the ear bones, and lastly we have one single bone which is called as hyoid. Well, depending upon the structure and location, they all vary. Well, before we proceed with this, let us understand where it is exactly present. The skull bone is where? On the topmost part, that is on the head region. Well, apart from that, why it is so and how does it exactly look? As you can see here in the diagram, the frontal view of the skull and the side view of the skull. And here only the bones are being shown to you. Then on the bones, what do we have? We have the covering, that is the muscle with which all the bones are covered, right? So here we have only the skeletal part, just the skeletal structure to show you how it exactly look in a dorsal view and on the ventral view. Well, student, apart from this, it serves as a place for the brain. Am I right? So it serves as a place for the brain. Also, depending upon the different types of bones, as they are being categorized into 4 different types. And these 4 different types are enlisted here. The cranium bones are altogether 8, facial bones 14, ear bones 6, and lastly, we have one single bone, as I just mentioned before, that is the hyoid bone, which is present exactly on the neck region, which is basically serve as a passage for different bones, which I'll make you understand. So, one single bone, that is hyoid bone. Before we proceed about all these different bones, I would like to show you how the skull looks like. Well, as you all can see here, this is the actual skull which is made up of the skull. You can see the dorsal view, the ventral view, and also this view. This is just to show you all that how exactly it looks like when we actually see. Apart from this, I would like to show you over this. As you can see this hole, what is this basically? This acts as a way for the brain for the passage of the nerves, for the passage of the blood, for the passage of the arteries, veins, and all the important nutrients and the blood vessels which is important for the brain to work. So with the help of this hole, what is this? This is the opening, this is the aperture with which it connects, the entire body connects with the brain. That's all. Let us understand by the diagram. So students, you must be worrying how to draw the diagram when it comes in the exam point of view. Am I right? So it's as simple as when we draw in a 2D direction. What you need to do is just draw the upper part, that is the skull part. Well, we are understanding here now the cranium bones. And how many altogether? 8 cranium bones. As you can see, it is so simple to draw. We'll just label it out and understand more in detail. So here I have just drawn a simple structure which is showing all the cranium bones. And how many they are altogether? 8. So let us understand it categorized and its labeling. Well, if I talk about the cranium bones, the first part is called as the frontal bone. What is this? Because it is present in the front region, it is also called as the frontal bone which makes up your forehead. Then we have the parietal followed by temporal. This is occipital. And here we have two bones, that is this one stands for E and S I am writing and then labeling it out here, that is called as ethmoid. And here with S I am labeling it out outside. Here I am writing O. Sphenoid. So the frontal bone which is just single, eight altogether. So as student, we have just discussed here the cranium bones are altogether 8. What is they? They are being categorized into frontal bones which is just a single which makes up your forehead. Then we have the parietal bone, temporal bone followed by occipital, sphenoid and ethmoid bone. I'll just quickly show you how does it exactly look in the skull. Here as you can see the bluish or the purplish part which makes up your frontal bone. Then the yellowish part makes up your parietal bone, which is basically the brain is divided into two hemispheres. You must have learned in the chapter chemical coordination and the nervous coordination. And there you must have studied the brain is divided into two hemispheres. So those hemispheres are being protected with these parietal bones. Are you getting me? Apart from that, the behind side that is serve as a passage, the connection between the temporal and the parietal, we have a very small bone. Why it is so? Because we have to give the circular shape to our skull so that it should be properly fit. And there we have the occipital bone followed by the reddish or pinkish part that you can see makes up your temporal bones. And we have the ethmoid and sphenoid bone, just single bones, and that's what it completes the 8 cranium bones. Did you get this much? Shall we talk about the facial bones now? Well, we have 14 facial bones. However, the diagram I have drawn here about the facial bone, that is when we see our face from the frontal view, how does it exactly look? But it is made up of 14 irregular bones. And here I would like to add up that the entire skull is made up of irregular bones. Why it is so? Because depending upon the place, depending upon the area, depending upon the sensitivity, all the bones are different. That's why it is also called as irregular bones. Well student, we were discussing about the facial bones. Facial bones are altogether 14. But for remembering this, if it is a difficult task for you, here I have a formula for the same. And that formula, if you are remembering, you will be able to label it out quickly. So that is basically the zygomatic bone. Here I'm also writing simultaneously the number of bones. All these are what? Just I have written the short form of the same. So we have nasal ganchai, femur, maxillae 2, mandible 1, palatines 2. Okay. Well, student, let's continue with this. The facial bones labeling, which is very, very important. The first we have Z stands for zygomatic bone. So here I am writing Z, which is basically zygomatic bone. Then we come here over here, that is called as the nasal bone, which I am writing the alphabets here and the naming here so that you should get the better understanding. That N stands for nasal bone. Then we have here these triangles. Can you see these? What is this stands for? These L stands for lacrimal. Lacrimal bones, which makes up, they are in pair. So 2 altogether. Here I have written this formula. If you remember, you will be able to label it out quickly. Then we have the N again, which is somewhere over here, this part. Can you see this part? And here we have again one more part which makes up the bones of your nose, and that is called as the nasal ganchai. Followed by again V stands for vomer. Can you see this small bone, students, which I am shading out with green? Can you make it out? Well, this is the center bone of your nose. And this stands for vomer, which is just single. Then we proceed further, that is this part, which I'll just colored it out with the purple for your better understanding. So this bone is called as the vomer. Vomer is, M stands for maxillae. Visible to you? Vomer. Then we have the next bone, which is M. M stands for mandible, which is this region. I am writing M for the better labeling. So this stands for mandible, which is just one single bone right from here to here. And then followed by the palatines. Now here, student, you cannot see palatines here in 2D structure. So let me tell you the groove which serve as a passage for the teeth. That is, when I am putting it ahead like this, I'll just show you in the diagram. This is my teeth groove. So this part here, this region stands for palatines, which is again in pair. So that's all together makes up the facial bone, which is again important to understand. This I was talking about the facial bones. This I was talking about the cranium bones. Cranium bones are just 8, but facial bones are 14 altogether. Again, as I just mentioned, they are irregular bones. So all these shapes are different. But labeling is important, that as you can see the side part, this part is basically called as the zygomatic bone. The frontal bone, that is called as the frontal bone of the forehead, that is called as the nasal bone. Then we have the two triangular shaped bone, that is called as lacrimal bones, followed by the nose bone, that is the nose bone that is called Nasal Ganchai, and then we have one in center that is called Femur. Then just below the nose, that bone is called as maxillae. Then the jaw part, which makes up your jaw, is basically called as mandible, which serves as the groove for the teeth, which is again important for the chewing of our food. Then we have the last bone, which is not visible here, but if we turn this face, I'll just show you. Here, student, in this picture, can you see these teeth groove? Here, can you see this serve as a teeth groove? Inside over here, somewhere over here, makes up your Palatine's bones. Did you get this much? So altogether, this completes the facial bones. I hope you're getting the better clarity. Well, student, let's talk about the very simple, that is the ear bone. That is altogether 6 bones. So here we have 6 bones, which is malleus. You remember this for remembering the name. Incus and stapes. What is this I just made? I just made this for the ear bones. For the ear. So we have 2 malleus, 2 incus and 2 stapes bones, which altogether makes up ear bones, that are altogether 6. Why 6? Because we have 2 ears, right? Well, student, this bone, that is stape, it is the smallest bone of the entire body. So here I would like to mention this smallest bone in human body. You all can remember for your exam point of view. Which is the smallest bone? That is the stape, that is the ear bone, which is the smallest bone of the entire human body. Then lastly, we have the hyoid bone, which do not make up the skull as such, but it serve as the joining for the mandible. This part, mandible, which serve as a jaw for the connection of these mandible with the skull, connection of these two somewhere over here. Somewhere over here, they makes up the hyoid bones. So that is one single paired hyoid bones, which somewhat looks like this. I'll just show you. Like this. And also from this, the cervical bones, which makes up the vertebral column, continuous. So this is one single hyoid bone which is present and serve as the joining for the mandibles from the skull. And also from this, the cervical bones continuous, which makes up the vertebral column. Are you getting it? So likewise, we have understood that the skull is being categorized into 4 different parts. Cranium, 8 bones with the labeling. Facials, 14 bones with the labeling. This formula you can remember for remembering the names of the same. And then we have the ear bone, which is stand for MIS, and stapes is the smallest bone, followed by the hyoid bones. But students, why are we learning this? There has to be some importance of it, right? So we need to understand the functions of the skull. And I hope without guessing it, you will quickly able to enlist the first important function of the skull. What is present inside the skull? Exactly your brain. The most important organ of the entire body, right? So that is the brain. So brain is being protected. So protects the brain. The brain is being protected under the skull. Apart from the brain is being protected, what do we have? We have these different bones. What is this? The nose bone, which is serving as the sense organ to smell. Then we have the presence of mandible. So mandible bone is important. Why so? Because it gives the groove for the teeth. And then also these mandible bones is basically forming your jaw, and that jaw is important for talking, for singing, or for whatever activity that you are doing right from your mouth and from your tongue. And also the tongue muscle, so it serve as, which serve as the mandible. The mandible and palatine. What do they do? The mandible and the palatine serve as the space and also the attachment for the teeth as well as for the tongue, which is important right from chewing, for talking, and all the different purposes. Now student, when I say skeletal, what comes to your mind? Is this the bone that comes to your mind? You're right. Now, this bone is completely covered with what? What is there around? Exactly, the muscles are there around, right? Isn't it? Muscles are there. Now, we need to understand what are these muscles exactly comprises of, which we are going to understand over here. That is called as the skeletal muscle. Also student, when I talk about the muscle near the bone, there are numerous fibers. Okay, so the skeletal muscles have numerous fibers, and also these fiber, as we all know that we all have the cell, and in the cell there is nucleus present, and in the nucleus, apart from the nucleus, we also have very important constituent, that is cytoplasm. Right student? So the nucleus and cytoplasm is the most prominent features of any kind of cell, right? Similarly, if I talk about these muscles, so muscles, skeletal muscles, they do have the cytoplasm, right? So they have the numerous fibers, they have the cytoplasm too. Cytoplasm too. But this cytoplasm in the muscle fiber is also called as sarcoplasm or sarcolemma. Sarcolemma or cytoplasm. What are they? They are the names of the skeletal cytoplasm. Now, as you can see here in the diagram, student, this is the diagram of the skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, wherein you can see these. What are these basically? They are called as the muscle bundles. What are they? They are called as the muscle bundle, which in biological term is called as fascicles. Fascicles. So what are fascicles? Fascicles are nothing but the muscle bundles. Now student, with this we can understand that the muscles are comprises of various fascicles. Now these fascicles still have something into it. Can you see these student? This is basically the sarcoplasm part, and these with which they are surrounded by, that is the cytoplasm, which is also called as sarcolemma. So the fascicles are completely intact into the sarcoplasm and sarcolemma. When we zoom out this structure, this one bundle, when we zoom out, we can see something like this. And what are they? These are called as sarcoplasm, and they are called as the blood capillaries. Because each and every part of the body is required or has to be supplied with the blood. So the entire muscle bundle is covered with the blood capillaries. Are you understanding, student? Apart from this, when we talk about the muscle bundle, it also have myofilaments. Myofilaments. These myofilaments have multiple things in it. Like what? They have the endoplasmic reticulum. What is endoplasmic reticulum, student? We all know that inside the cell, inside each and every cell, whether it is a plant cell or it is an animal cell, we have something called as ER. Something called as ER. This ER is basically endoplasmic reticulum. Right, student? So this endoplasmic reticulum, what is the function of it? Why it has to be there, students? Because it stores calcium. It stores calcium. And this calcium is required by the muscle so that the muscle movement can be easily possible for the movement of muscle. Similarly, this myofilaments also contains mitochondria. Mitochondria. Now, we all know why is mitochondria present. Mitochondria is also called as a powerhouse of the cell. So, this mitochondria is basically serves as a ATP store, which gives, or we can say which provides energy. And why we need the energy? Again, for the movement of muscle. Movement of muscles. So student, these are the two prominent features in the myofilaments so that the movement of the muscle should be possible. That is the ER and mitochondria. Apart from these, we also have this appearance, the myofilaments appearance, which is striated in structure. Students, what do you understand by this striated appearance? Basically, it is alternate light and dark bands, which you must have seen that the cardiac cell, they are striated in nature, right? So, striated appearance is basically all about the alternate light and dark band, as you can see here. This is called as the striated appearance. Now, why am I telling you about this striated appearance? Because the muscles are indeed of the proteins, or the entire muscles are basically comprises of the proteins. So this muscles, which is in the myofilaments, we have two types of proteins. We have two types of proteins. Basically, this protein is actin and myosin. Actin shows light appearance, whereas myosin shows the dark appearance. So, due to this actin and myosin proteins, the striated appearance of the myofilament is observed in the skeletal muscle. Are you understanding, student? So, due to this light and dark, which stands for actin and myosin, two types of proteins, this striated appearance is observed in the muscle, and that's how the structure of the muscle is completed. Well, student, if we talk about thoracic cage, basically it is made up of 12 semicircular bones. What it is made up of altogether? 12 semicircular bones. Also, the other name of the thoracic cage is rib cage. Why it is so? Why it is called as rib? Because each bone which is comprises of the entire cage is called as the rib. Why it is so? Because the bone is called the rib. Before we proceed with the structure, let us understand how is the entire cage is made up of. So when I talk about the thoracic cage, it is made up of three important things. And what are those three? Basically, the bones itself. The first one is, it is made up of ribs, ventrally on the either side. Then it is also made up of the sternum, followed by vertebral column. How so, student? As you can see here in this diagram, the upper part that is called as the sternum, and the cage that you can see, the semicircular bones, which is altogether 12 in pair, not only 12 but 12 in pair. Followed by behind, as you can see, what is attached? The vertebral column. This line is basically what? It is vertebral column which is continuing from the cervical region till the coccyx region. So, the thoracic cage is made up of the ribs, the sternum and the vertebral column. So, let's talk about the ribs first. When I talk about the ribs are basically of three types. The ribs are of three types, exactly. The true ribs, and the other one is called as the false rib, exactly opposite of this. The false ribs, and the third one is floating ribs. Now let us understand that how do they differ and why it is called as a different sort of bones. Just have a look on the picture, students. Here you can see in the center, which is the center bone, which is called as sternum, which is slightly like this, like a tie shape, like this. The center bone that is called as the sternum, right? This bone is attached with this, with the ribs like this. Am I right? Here you can see in the diagram. So, the true ribs are the ones which are directly attached to the sternum. So, what are true ribs? They are attached to the sternum. Well, and how many bones altogether? Well, out of this 12 semicircular bones, students, the first 7 pairs are called the true ribs. But what is the reason? Because they are attached to the sternum directly, hence they are also called as the true ribs. Well, let's talk about the next, that is the false ribs, which is exactly opposite of this. So, can you guess it what? Exactly, it will not be attached to the sternum directly. So, they are not attached to sternum. And how many are they? There are 3 bones. Which ones? The 8th bone after 7, the 8th one, the 9th one, and the 10th one. So here, what do we understand? We understand that the bones which are directly attached to the sternum are called as true ribs. The bones which are not directly attached, but somewhere they are forming all together, right from down to up. They are not exactly attached, but yes, they are forming it. They are attached to it, but not directly. So they are called as the false ribs. And there are 3 false ribs in the entire thoracic cage, followed by 8th, 9th and 10th one. Now, what are these? The floating ribs. From the name itself, you can guess it out. Exactly. It will neither be attached to the sternum, it will neither be truly attached nor be false attached. But what will be exactly? It will be exactly free floating. So, free floating. That means that are originating from the vertebral column, but not coming in contact with the sternum at all. So, not coming in contact with sternum at all. That's a concept of floating ribs. And how many are they? They are just 2 ribs which are called as the floating ribs. And what they are? The next one after 10, what it will be? 11, exactly. 11th and the 12th bone. What are these two bones? These two bones are called as the floating ribs, which are free floating, which are just arising from the vertebral column, and they are just halfway. They are just halfway. They are not coming ahead. So they are called as the free floating ribs, which are just two, that is 11th and 12th. And all these bones are in pair. So you understood the concept of the ribs, three types of ribs followed by the number of pairs. Let's talk about the sternum. Here, as you can see in the picture, exactly it is looking like this sternum, right? So what are they structure wise? They are flat bones attached in the center, attached at the center of the cage. What is this basically? They are the small bone bones, and what it is, as you can see, the small one, but it plays a very, very important role. Why so, student? Because as you can see, all the ribs are attached to this. So what is this basically? It gives the passage, it gives the way for what? For the attachment of the ribs. So way for ribs attachment. You got this much? So here we were talking about the sternum, which is the small bone, which is also a flat. It is looking a tie shape, right? T-shaped, right? And also it is in the center of the entire thoracic cage, as you can see here, and the ribs are arranged ventrally on the either side, which serves as a passage, which serves as the groove for the attachment of the different ribs. And without this support, will the ribs will be attached properly? No, not at all. That's why it also acts as a way for what? For the ribs to attach to it. And that's how it completes the front part and the side part. But what about behind? What about in the dorsal region? We have the vertebral column. You must have learnt about vertebral column in the bones of the vertebrae. There you must have understood about one type of bone, which is called as the thoracic vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae. What is this thoracic vertebrae? What is this thoracic vertebrae? The thoracic vertebrae are the one which are attached in the thoracic region, which is forming the behind surface, that is the dorsal view of the cage. And all together the comprises of the ribs, sternum and vertebral column give an entire space between it, right? And what is the space used for, student? Exactly. So here we have to learn something about the function of the same. So, what are the functions of the same? As you just mentioned, that it gives the passage, it gives the entire gap, and that gap is basically protect internal organs. Protect internal organs. Here, which internal organs I am talking about? What is present in the thoracic region? Exactly, we have heart present there. And also, we have lungs present there. And if we have heart present here, what will be there apart from this? The blood vessels, the blood capillaries. So, also the blood vessels. So, student, the main and important function of the vertebral column or the thoracic cage is what? Is basically to protect all the internal organs which are situated between the ribs. Okay, and what are they basically? The heart, the very important organ, the lung, the very important organ which serves the breathing point, and apart from that, the various blood vessels, right from the pulmonary artery, pulmonary veins, aorta, all these which are basically attached attached to the heart. So all these internal organs are protected in the rib cage. Apart from that, the one last function, student, you must have observed when you are breathing in, when you are breathing out, you must have observed that your thoracic region is slightly ahead, going upward and downward movement. Upward and downward movement. What it is exactly? It is basically your thoracic cage, which serve as a breathing point for the human being. And also, as you can see here in this diagram, what is this bone situated behind the triangular shape? You must have studied in the appendicular, that is the forelimbs on the hind limbs bones. Here, it gives the passage also for what? It gives the passage for the clavicle to attach. So, clavicle and girdle is attached. So, why it is important? So, it is important because it gives the passage, it gives the way for the sternum and also the clavicle and girdle, which serve as the bone of the forelimbs and hind limbs. And it gives the way with which, as you can see, the first top layer of the sternum is attached to the clavicle, which is S-shaped rod. You must have studied in the other bones, right? So that's how it exactly the structure is comprises, with the ribs, with the sternum and with the vertebral column. And why it is important? The only thing is that it protects all the internal organs which is situated in the thoracic region. Did you get this much? That's all about this concept of thoracic cage. We'll be learning about something really interesting. Yes, it's about vertebral column. All that you need to walk, to run, to hop, to take a posture, to stand, and without which our body is just cannot take any activity. Well, student, let's start with the concept of vertebral column. First of all, let us understand about structure. As you all can see in the picture, well, it is a long and also it is flexible. Why so? Because with the help of which you can take a movement front, ahead, you can bend down. Am I right? So that's why it is flexible. So it is a long rod which is flexible. Apart from that, as you can see where the skull is ending, right from there till the last part, that is the coccyx part, what it is extended. So yes, it is right from the skull, arises from skull. Exactly. Well, student, not only this, but as you can see a different sacs. What it is basically, it is like a disc. For example, this is one such vertebral column. It's like this, and one above the other it is attached. So altogether, basically, it is forming with vertebrae. So what are vertebrae? Each disc from the vertebral column is called as vertebrae. Apart from this, the first and the second one, that is atlas and axis. These are the first and second vertebrae. And what are they basically? The atlas and axis, the first and second vertebrae, which gives the axis to originate from the skull. Well, student, let me tell you all, as you can see different colors here. What are these? These are basically different types of vertebrae. So, in the entire vertebral column is comprises of 5 different vertebrae. Vertebrae is of 5 different types. Well, in the neck region, as you can see the pinkish part, that is called as the cervical. That is called as the cervical, the neck region. Then followed by, as you can see, the purplish part which is between the thoracic region, or we can say a thoracic cage. So this part is called as the thoracic part. Thoracic. Why so? Because it is also situated in the thoracic region. Then let's move towards the little down part where it is abdominal cavity. That part is called as lumbar. Then this part is called as sacrum. And lastly, the small bone that is called as coccyx. Why these are of 5 type? Because as I just mentioned that it is made up of the entire vertebral column is made up of the irregular bones. What it is made up of? It is made up of irregular bones. And these irregular bones are slightly of this shape. And also student, if they are irregular, there may be different types of vertebral disc, right? And each disc is called as the vertebral disc. Well students, apart from this, they have altogether, there are 26 bones, which comprises of the entire vertebral column. So these 26 bones are being categorized as 7 cervical bone, which is present in the neck region. Then 12 thoracic bone, which is, as you can see, is present in the thoracic cage. So it is present in the thoracic region. Similarly, then the lumbar, that is 5 bones which is present in the lumbar region, which is, as you can see, slight greenish color. So it is present near the abdominal cavity. So they are in abdominal region. Then the sacrum, which is basically, the sacrum is mixed, or you can say the fusion of 4 different bones. So the fusion of 5 bones make up of just one single bone. As you can see, 7 bones, cervical, thoracic 12, lumbar 5. But here it is a complete fusion of 5 different vertebrae which forms just one sacrum altogether. These and these are slightly similar. Why so? Because the coccyx is again one single bone, but it is again the fusion of 4 different bones. Fusion of 4 vertebrae. Here, fusion of 5 vertebrae and fusion of 4 vertebrae. So, well student, here in this part, the sacrum part and coccyx part, basically we just have one bone, which is a fusion of 5 vertebrae forming a one bone that forms your sacrum, and the 4 fusion of the bones forms your coccyx. However, the shape of the sacrum and coccyx, which makes up the tail of the vertebral column, slightly vary from male to female. And that's what which gives the space for the embryonic stage and the baby to grow. Now, apart from this, that there are 26 bones, long, flexible, they are arising from the axis and forming the tail. Altogether, this vertebral column is, again, why are we studying this? Because of some functions, right? So the functions of same is, it gives the posture to the body. It gives a posture to the body. Without the vertebral column, our body will not be able to stand, will not be able to take a stand properly. Apart from that, it is also important to serve as a different internal organs. So, it is a support for internal organ. And also, altogether, it gives a ability to stand and take or carry all the activity. that you perform in day-to-day life. So that's why, student, how important is the vertebral column. Altogether, what you need to understand is the vertebral column is comprised of 26 bones, and each bone is called as vertebrae, which are of 5 types, followed by cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum and coccyx, and the number of bones and the region with which. Well, I'll give you the small hint, or you can say a quick thing with which you can easily remember all these different bones. That is the formula for the vertebral column. What is this formula? Just remember this. C stands for cervical. And how many bones do we have? Exactly 7. T stands for thoracic. How many bones do we have? 12. Exactly. L stands for lumbar. How many bones do we have? 5. Right, student? Here sacrum stands for S and only 1 bone. Coccyx stands for C and only 1 bone. So you can use this as your formula to remember the number of vertebrae in the vertebral column, and with the help of which it will become easy for you to understand and remember the number of bones present in the vertebral column. T7, T12, L5, C1 and C1. That's all for this concept of vertebral column. I hope you've got the clarity. We are talking about the pectoral girdle. Now student, there are 2 types of girdles. The first one is pectoral and the second one is pelvic. So now we'll be discussing about the pectoral girdle. Basically, student, these girdles are the part of appendicular system. Appendicular system. You must have learnt that the bones are classified as axial bones in appendicular system. Axial system and appendicular system. So amongst the appendicular system, the girdle is one such. Now, when I talk about the pectoral girdle is made up of 2 important bones. So it consists of 2 bones as I just mentioned. Namely, the first one is called as the scapula and the second is called as collar bone, and the another name for the collar bone is clavicle. Okay, student. So these are the 2 bones involved in the pectoral girdle. Now, basically this pectoral girdle is there for the joining, connection to your hands. That is, both the girdles are standing for the connection of your hands and legs, namely. As you can see here in the diagram, student, the 2 bones involved over here, this is the first one that is called as clavicle and the triangular shaped bone is called as scapula. So, what is this bone stands for? This is called as clavicle. And the pink one is called as we just discussed, this stands for scapula. Now student, I'll quickly demonstrate you so that we can describe the structure of the same. Okay. Now this bone, just have a look into this bone. This is the one which stands over here, clavicle. Now can you see this, how it is exactly? It is a rod shaped, right? A rod shaped. So we'll just list it out the structure also. The clavicle is rod shaped. Also, when we look into its structure, how exactly it is looking like, student? It is looking like a slight S shaped. So rod shaped. Secondly, S-shaped. And how exactly it is? Flat or thick? It is a thin, right? Thin bone. So this is just the structure that we have described, student, okay? And the clavicle bone is also called as the collarbone. Okay, so collarbone, we understood that it is slightly S-shaped, it is thin, and also it is like a rod. Now, let's talk about the another one that is called as scapula. I'll quickly demonstrate you so that you can understand and describe the structure by your own. Just have a look over here, student. This is the scapula that is being shown over here. I'm demonstrating you. When we look into its structure completely, just observe what you can. Can you tell me the shape of this? Exactly, it is slightly triangular in shape. So it is slightly triangular in shape. Then it is thin, right? It is thin, triangular shaped bones. Now student, this is located like this as it is shown in the diagram too. The length of this includes your rib cage. What does it include? It includes your rib cage from front and also from behind. So student, this is located between 2nd to 7th rib. So it involves what? It involves 2nd to 7th rib right from here, that is from the neck region to the down. Now student, I'll just quickly demonstrate you both the bones together so that we can link it out and we can write the functions of the same. Now, can you see this student? This is a scapula and clavicle together. Scapula and clavicle together. Now student, when we talk about this is basically the collarbones that is present in your neck region. Okay, then if I talk about this bone single, you can see some projections over here. This projection is called as, there are two projections. One is completely embedded in the muscle, that is called as, coracoid. Coracoid is completely embedded in muscles. Then we also have student over here that is called as acromion joint. Acromion joint, where exactly the edge of the collarbone attaches. Okay, so acromion, where exactly the collarbone is attached. Apart from this student, we have one small cavity over here. The cavity over here is called as, this cavity is called as glenoid cavity. So we do have the presence of glenoid cavity over here. Now why is this cavity present, student? Because as you can see here in the diagram, this is the scapula, this is the clavicle. Both these bones joined with this purple one, which is called as humerus. What it is this called as? Humerus. So the joining of the humerus is nowhere but it is attached with the clavicle. And this joining is basically, this cavity is basically to join the humerus with the clavicle to complete the joint. As I just mentioned, connection to your hands is with the help of the scapula, or you can see the pectoral girdle. So why do we have the glenoid cavity over here? So that the head of the humerus can be attached to it, or you can say articulate to it. So this cavity is present so that the humerus can be attached. Humerus is attached. Okay student, so that's how we have seen the structure of the pectoral girdle, which involves the collarbone and clavicle. That is collarbone and the scapula, which is also called as the shoulder bone. Shoulder bone. So student, that's all about the concept of the pectoral girdle, where simply we have understood that how it is the connection of your hands with the help of your girdle. Now student, the pelvic girdle is a part of appendicular system. You must have learned about the bone is being categorized into the axial system and appendicular system. So we are learning about the appendicular system, that is pelvic girdle. If I talk about pelvic girdle, it is basically made up of three important bones. Okay, so it consists of three bones, namely the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. Students, here I have drawn the diagram also and labeled it out, that where exactly the ilium part, where exactly the ischium part, and where exactly the pubis part. Now student, you know what, very interesting. In children below the age of 3 years, these bones, these three bones are different, separate. And once in adult, how they are started growing, all these three bones fused together. So very important point that you need to remember is, in children, these bones are separate. In adult, it completely fused to form one single bone. Okay student, now ilium, ischium and pubis, I'll just quickly demonstrate and I'll make you understand more clear. Here I have taken a one bone which is basically the comprises of the these sort of two pair of bones. Now here this part, as you can see, this part, the flat part which you can completely feel, which is thin and broad. Okay, this part is your ilium part, which is also been shown over here. Then we come to the next, that is the down part. Can you see this part? Can you see this down part? This down part is basically made up of the ischium, as you can see here in the diagram. Then we have the pubis part at the center. So likewise, the pair of these three bones form a semicircular. So what do they form exactly, student? They form a semicircular structure. We do also have a pair of four bones fused together. They are called as coccygeal bones, or you can say coccyx, which is also called as coccygeal bones. Now these bones are nothing but four fused bones. Right student? When these bones are fused, they are the end of the vertebral column. So student, the end of the vertebral column, then we have these bones, then it completely form a inner chamber that is called as the inner circle. Apart from these three things, it has a sharp groove. It has a presence of sharp groove that is called as acetabulum. Acetabulum, here I have labeled in the diagram. Now this acetabulum is basically like a cavity. It is like a cavity. Now student, this cavity, inside this cavity, what has to enter? Can you see this femur bone? The femur bone, the head of the femur bone goes and completely join with the acetabulum and forms a ball and socket model. So the head of femur joins with acetabulum, that is a groove or a cavity. And what do they form, student? They form a very important concept called as ball and socket model. Ball and socket model. I'll quickly demonstrate you. Student, just have a look over here. This is the bone called as ilium, ischium and pubis. Now, can you see this whole cavity? This cavity is called as acetabulum, and this is the femur bone. And this femur bone, we have again a groove which completely enters into the acetabulum to form a ball and socket model, with the help of which your leg or your hip is able to move completely. Are you understanding, student? So this is what is being shown over here in the diagram too. Okay, so this is how it completely forms the structure called as the pelvic girdle. Students, in female, this bone is able to wide. So it is slightly elastic, you can say. In female, the girdle is widened during the childbirth. So that the baby should be able to deliver out. Whereas when I talk about the male body, it is not having any elasticity as such. So here we understood the concept of pelvic girdle, where pelvic girdle is basically the connection of your leg to your hip. Okay, which is comprises of ilium, ischium and pubis, which is having an acetabulum. Acetabulum is connecting the femur, and femur is also called as the thigh bone, and that's how the connection of pelvic girdle completes. So student, that's all about this concept. I hope you've got the clarity. To get more clarity in your concept, stay tuned with Study Live. Thank you.